Um, I read a case a while back in the Eye. It was actually a transcript or a copy of a report in the Liverpool Echo, and it was about a 64-year-old man by the name of Stephen Smith who had a range of health problems, and the last months of his life were spent fighting the Department of Work and Pensions. Now, rather than just reading the whole report out, the report's by Liam Thorpe, who actually met Stephen Smith before he passed away. Rather than reading it all out, because it's a little bit long and I'll let it speak for itself, I just want to share my thoughts on this case. But a little bit of background. Stephen Smith was a man who was suffering from a range of health problems, including, I believe, osteoarthritis, among other things. Now, when he passed away, the Liverpool Echo carried a story, or it may have actually been before he passed away. He was severely malnourished, severely emaciated, and quite honestly, he looked like someone who came out of Auschwitz or one of the concentration camps in the Bosnian War. Um, I mean, I'm shocked seeing it because it's horrifying. It would be horrifying anywhere, but to think that this is in a developed country in the year 2019 is absolutely reprehensible. And the reason it's reprehensible, health problems are a fact of life, but nobody, nobody should have to spend the last months of their life fighting the state. Um, I don't know much about the condition, but I understand it can be very painful. Now, critics will say, oh, but you can't prove that his issues with the DWP led to his death. It may not have been the cause of his death, but common sense indicates that it would have greatly exacerbated the strain and the stress that he was under. In fact, Liam Thorpe had visited him and said that he had been on the rebound. The DWP issued a statement saying they would look into the mistakes made from the case and would learn from it. And they send out their condolences to Stephen's family at this difficult time. How I interpret that, crocodile tears. Absolute crocodile tears. Why? Because if this was an isolated case, you could say, okay, it was a tragic situation of negligence. Someone got it wrong, and a man died in circumstances that he shouldn't have died in. The DWP may not have killed him, but they definitely cause unnecessary strain in the last months of his life. And it isn't isolated. So that's why it's crocodile tears, because if it was isolated, you could buy that propaganda, but I don't buy it. I think they just find it an inconvenience that they were exposed. Now, the article mentions that Stephen's job advisor actually himself alluded to failures in the system, and it sounds like he was a decent man. He cared about Stephen. And this is true. I don't believe everyone in the Department for Work and Pensions, every single person, is a bad person. But fundamentally, there is a culture thing going on here. It's a culture that is obsessed by targets, is obsessed by sanctioning people, and is obsessed by giving a nod to right wing tabloid editors. I mean, it's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. The Department for Work and Pensions, or the welfare state, it's went through various names over the years, but the welfare state was set up to provide a safety net for people who were struggling. Now, whatever you think of it, that was the original goal. And that, in my view, is an absolute hallmark of a developed country. Absolutely necessary. What I really, really find frustrating about a lot of right wing thinkers, and this is unfortunately a left right wing thing. A lot of right wing thinkers, they look at headlines in the Daily Express or the Daily Mail or the Sun, or what vultures like Jeremy Kyle come out with, is Jeremy Kyle will take the most extreme cases and present that as the norm. And they'll assume all claimants are like that. Therefore, the Conservative Party get public support by showing a false narrative. Now, Tory ministers aren't going to get up and say, oh, we want the lazy dole scroungers to work. They'll be more subtle than that, but you just have to look at their billboard campaign in 2010. The cynical way in which they were trying to drive people with jobs against the unemployed. Absolutely reprehensible. I believe over the last sort of 10, 15 years, the DWP has went from being an organisation that was set up to provide a safety net to being a weapon of the state, to basically degrade, scapegoat, and marginalise people who cannot defend themselves. I do think it is the 21st century equivalent of Victorian workhouses, i.e., people are in a situation where they've got no choice. They have to sign on because when they're out of work, they've no other means of support. But they know that doing so, they'll have to go through degrading work programs. They'll have to go through that. I've been through it. I know what it's like. It was one of the unhappiest periods of my life. Very humiliating. Very degrading. You're basically treated like a criminal in everything but name. Now the Tories say when this comes up in PMQs or other situations, they say, "Oh, but we're trying to help people back into work." The Tories never ask the unemployed themselves. Of course not. Um, but they say it's about trying to help people. How do you help people by degrading them, by threatening them, by treating them like criminals? I am convinced that the DWP has become a weapon. It's kind of like a gangster organization. It's become a very nasty, callous organization. So that statement of condolence and that plea or that statement that they would learn from their lessons is just a lie. I don't believe it for a second. Because if that was true, they would have learned after the many other cases similar to this one. It's absolutely infuriating. I would say it's criminal, if not de jure, de facto, it is criminal. And the likes of Esther McVeigh and other callous Tories who just don't have any human compassion whatsoever for people like Stephen Smith, I think that should exclude those sort of Tories from higher office. How can someone lead a country when they have such callous contempt for some of the most vulnerable people in society? And I do single Esther McVeigh out because she is a good example. There's others, Ian Duncan Smith, Andrea Leadsom. I don't believe that everyone in the DWP is a bad person. I don't believe every Tory is a bad person. But this is something that would always stop me in my conscience from ever voting Tory, so long as they are the party that is pushing this culture. And yes, it began under New Labour. New Labour was not much better. But it is absolutely irrefutable that part of the Tories' target demographic, their base, is people who read the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Express, and want to see the unemployed, working for their benefits. Therefore, they have this kind of one size fits all approach. It's collective punishment. Some would say this isn't deliberate, that it's administrative error. At best, the best you could say about that is that bureaucracy is hurting people. But unfortunately, and I don't want to think this, but the evidence would indicate this, I think there's more to it than that. I think this is actually a deliberate culture of trying to degrade people. I think the only thing the Tories are interested in is reducing unemployment rates. They don't care about the names. They don't care how many suicides there are. They don't care how many people are pushed over the edge. They don't care that terminally sick people are being degraded and threatened in the final months of their lives. They don't care. All they care about is lowering the unemployment rate. Tabloid editors, callous vultures that they are, I think they're some of the most despicable people around. You will never ever see the Daily Mail or the Sun or the Express report this, or the Tory graph for that matter. On many issues, my views fit into the centre or even on the right. I'll be quite honest, this is one where, yeah, they do go more to the left. And whilst I'm no Corbynite, whilst I remain very critical of Corbyn's worldview and his foreign policy, this is one area, if not others, that he is right about. Quite honestly, Jeremy Corbyn is the only major party leader that hasn't scapegoated the unemployed or hasn't endorsed policies that do. Okay, the Greens don't do it, but they're not a viable party of government. Labour is. So it's one area that I think Corbyn is right about. The Liberal Democrats certainly didn't do anything to speak out about this callousness when they were in government, and they haven't done so since, or at least it's been muted. The Greens and the SNP have, but they're frankly single issue parties that don't believe in the country. So this has to be a countrywide situation. The SNP only cares about it in Scotland, and the Greens don't believe in the UK, and they're not a party of government. Therefore, Labour, um, if let's just say that there is a Corbyn government, it's one area that I hope he sticks to his conviction on, overturns his ghastly situation, has a serious, serious review into the culture of the DWP. Of course, the tabloids will distort it. They'll say, oh, Corbyn wants to give free money to the work shy, because that's what these nasty rags do. It's industrial scale distortion. And I'm not saying there aren't people who abuse the system. There are the likes of the Philpots and others who do abuse the system, and it's wrong. I've always said that. What I find unconscionable, though, is this collective punishment approach. I mean, it is absolutely heart wrenching and infuriating that in a developed country in the year 2019, people are being bullied and harassed and degraded and forced to fight against the state in the dying months of their lives. I mean, this is a serious human rights violation. So when we lecture other countries about human rights, whilst other countries may be far worse in terms of freedom of expression and many other areas, this is one that we really can't boast about. I really do believe, like I say, that the DWP has put us into a situation where it's the 21st century equivalent of Victorian workhouses. That dreaded spectre of the workhouse. Either face absolute destitution under a bridge or go to the workhouse. Well, today people have the choice of sign on, put up with bullying advisors, degrading treatment, soul destroying work programs, 35 hours a week job search when you're not getting any sort of wage. Because this is something the public are really ill informed about. Most people, or at least right leaning people, think that the unemployed are just given thousands of money. They'll hear about extreme cases. They'll hear, like, I don't know, some guy has had 10 different children by 7 different women and he's getting thousands in benefits. And yeah, those cases are disgraceful. But they do not form the bulk of cases. There are many people who probably are entitled to sign on but are not doing so because either they've been through it before or they hear cases like this. So when the Tories boast about certain statistics of unemployment, they're not recognising that many people are voluntarily signing off, but they don't necessarily have a job. They're signing off because they're sick and tired of being treated like criminals. I don't think the Tory party differentiates between petty criminals and the unemployed. I really don't, because they treat them pretty much one and the same. The DWP was set up as a safety net. It's become a weapon to punish people. And that film, I, Daniel Blake, I haven't watched it precisely, and it's set in Newcastle upon Tyne, very close to home. I've been through the system. The reason I didn't watch it is because I thought this is going to be just too close to the surface. I I feel sad, but more to the point, I feel angry. I feel angry that the last months of this man's life were spent instead of trying to find inner peace, trying to, I don't know if he was a man of faith or not, but trying to, come to terms with his final months. He spent it being distracted. There were other cases as well, and the report will lay that out more comprehensively than I have. But credit to the Liverpool Echo for covering the case. And to be fair, the Daily Mirror has covered these sort of situations as well. I'm often critical of tabloids, but the Daily Mirror has been quite consistent on this. As for the Sun, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, and the Daily Express, their editors are shameless for distorting the situation, for basically ignoring cases like this. They'll just ignore it. And the Tory party for giving nods to vultures like Paul Dacre makes my blood boil. There are areas I agree with the Conservative Party on, particularly quite a lot of foreign policy areas. But when it comes to situations like this is why I can never bring myself to vote Tory. And to those who say, oh, it's not just a Tory issue, yes, it's true, New Labour were just as bad. But 9 years of Tory austerity, they have been pushing this. So, yes, they are directly responsible along with these tabloid editors. I also hold those tabloid editors responsible because they're distorting the facts. They're only showing half the picture. They're showing extreme cases of welfare abuse and, in the most cowardly way, ignoring cases like this. As for the DWP, disgraceful, absolutely shameful. One final point: Tory leadership candidates who, push this really hard line when it comes to welfare. In my view, they're not fit for higher office because how can someone lead the country when they have such callous contempt for the most marginalised people in society, the likes of Esther McVeigh? My God, I hope they don't make her leader. So-called compassionate conservatism, one nation Toryism, needs to look at this, be angry about it. I want to see a Tory vocally saying, we are wrong about this, we've been pushing this the wrong way for too long. When Ian Duncan Smith resigned, he made allusions to it, but only after 3 or 4 years of him pushing the most ruthless welfare policies out there. So that just seemed hypocritical. It seemed insincere. And I'll wrap this up, but rest in peace, Stephen Smith. And right now, there are other people out there in this very situation. The DWP are a bunch of insincere liars. If they really were going to clean up their act, if they were going to learn their lessons, it's the most bureaucratic, robotic, soulless rubbish